In this video, I'm going to show you the basic process for placing support and resistance areas while I place them. To identify support and resistance areas, you need to look for strong bounces or areas in which price is stalled. You do this on the daily and 12-hour charts. This is a daily USD CHF chart. Let's place some support and resistance areas on this. The first step to placing support and resistance areas is to place the easy ones. You want to look for the most obvious bounces and place them. So here we have a very strong and obvious bounce, which lines up with this bounce here too. Now technically, with a bounce this large, it's okay to place an area based only on one bounce, only on this big one here. But it's always nice to have extra confirmation, so it's good that we have another bounce to the left. Up here we have this big single bounce, so we can place an area here based only on this bounce. You can also look back if you want to for a second bounce, but it's not necessary. One very large recent bounce is enough proof for support and resistance. In this case though, if we look to the left, it does look like price has bounced from this area here too. So this one has two bounces also. And if you look further back, you can see this bounce here too. Now this bounce is a little higher. So why not put support resistance here instead? Why not put it higher? Why put it at the lower bounces? Price bounced from here not too long ago. Well, this leads to one of the most important rules for placing support and resistance. And that rule is recent data is more important. The fresher the data, the fresher the bounces, the more important they are. So here we have one bounce from late February 2016. And here we have a bounce from May 2016. The May 2016 bounce is more significant than the bounce from February. And here we have another bounce from July 2016. This bounce is even more significant than either of the last two. The more recent the data, the more weight it holds for placing support and resistance. Why? Well, because who cares about what happened 5 years ago on your chart, or even 5 months ago? If price is no longer bouncing from that level, and the recent bounces are from higher or lower than that level, then that is where price is reacting now. That's where buyers and sellers are grouped now. So recent data is more important. Let's continue placing a few more on the most recent data. Okay, if you want to place support and resistance areas in a zone like this one, but you don't really have any candles in that zone, there's no data for you to place your support resistance areas with. It's okay to scroll back. Even if you have to scroll back a few years before you see candles in that zone, that's okay. Older areas placed on data from a few years ago aren't as reliable, and you should replace them as soon as candles move back into that area and you get some fresh data. But when the most recent data you have is from 2012, it's okay to use it. So let's scroll back and get some support resistance areas up here. Alright, it doesn't look like we have to scroll back to 2012, 2013, 2011, whatever. We don't have to scroll back that far. We can see several bounces up here in this area. They may be clearer on the 12-hour chart though. Let's look. I often drop down to the 12-hour chart in order to see more detail in bounces. Sometimes the extra candles shown on a lower time frame make bounces clearer, so it becomes easier to place areas there. You shouldn't drop down any lower than the 12-hour chart though, and that's because you're going to see too many minor bounces, and you would end up placing too many support resistance areas because then you'll be placing areas at every little bounce you see, and when you go back up to the daily, all your support resistance areas are going to be very close together and it's going to be impossible to trade there. Okay, so on the 12-hour, these bounces are definitely much clearer. So I'm going to place a support resistance area here, and we'll go back to the daily. Okay, here we see a spike created by this wick. So we can see how price spiked up to here and then pulled back down. And it also lines up with this bounce over here. So I'm going to place an area here. Okay, here we have 3 bounces from the same area. Here, here, and here. All recent, so this is an obvious support resistance area. Okay, here we have one bounce. Let's drop down to the 12-hour here. It might be a bit clearer. Okay, so we have one bounce here, another hit as price tried to make its way down after breaking through back to the daily. And there also seems to be a very big bounce here. Okay, that's cool. I like to focus mostly on the daily chart and drop down to the 12-hour just when I need that extra bit of data. Okay, so here we have a strong bounce and it's very recent. And we have bounces through here, which are also very recent. And we have a bounce here too. So this one's a good placement. I'm going to place a support resistance area here. Okay, so that should be it for support resistance areas for USD CHF. Remember, recent data is more important. That's what you should take away from this video. Place your support resistance areas based on the most recent data. If you have a bounce that's a little bit higher than a bounce that formed a few weeks ago or a few months ago, then you place it at the most recent bounce. The most recent bounce is more important. Recent data is more important. But what about placing these areas? I kind of rushed through and placed these ones, but you may feel like something's missing. For example, should you place these support resistance areas at the wicks or at the bodies of the candles? Are there any rules to placing support resistance areas? And the answer to that is yes, there are, and we're going to look at those in the next video.